People say when family asks to move in, it means trust. But when your son-in-law stands in your own lake house, the house you worked 30 years to afford, and calmly tells you it would be better if you stayed somewhere else for a while, that isn't trust. That's displacement. He didn't yell. He didn't argue. He just said his parents needed recovery time. My daughter stood beside Amaha and Mat, quiet. And for a moment, I almost believed I was the unreasonable one. So I agreed. I packed a small bag. I handed over the keys. And before I walked out the front door, I made one small adjustment to the house, something neither of them noticed. 3 days later, my phone lit up. Someone was walking through my living room, and it wasn't family. My name is Elias Godebed. I'm 66 years old, and I spent 28 of those years managing mountain resorts outside Aspen. When you work in hospitality that long, you learn to notice what other people ignore. The extra towel missing, the lamp moved an inch to the left, the way footsteps sound different when someone doesn't belong in a room. The lake house in Coeur d'Alene was supposed to be my last address. Cedar siding, a narrow dock that creaks when the water rises. In late summer, the air smells like pine sap and warm stone. In winter, it smells like cold iron and wood smoke from the neighbors' fireplaces. I bought it 2 years after my wife passed. Her name was Anahid. She used to say the water there looked like hammered glass at sunset. I can still hear her laugh echoing across the dock. Some evenings, when the wind hits the railing just right, it sounds like someone clearing their throat before speaking. For a second, I still turned my head. After she was gone, the house became my routine. Coffee at 6:30, the clock above the fireplace ticking steady, a slow walk along the shoreline before noon. Quiet, honest quiet. Then my daughter called one evening. Her voice was softer than usual. "It's just temporary, Dad," she said. "They really need the space." I told her I understood, and I meant it. Families help each other. That's how I raised her. Her husband arrived the next day with a folder tucked under his arm. He didn't raise his voice. He laid out numbers instead. Medical bills, relocation costs, projected recovery timelines. He spoke the way men do when they've rehearsed something in the mirror. "It'll only be for a couple of months," he added. "We'll handle everything." Handle everything. He said it like a promise, not like a request. I watched how he stood in the living room, slightly angled toward my daughter instead of me. I've seen that posture before, at check-in desks, at contract tables. The body doesn't lie, even when the words do. Still, I agreed. I told myself I wasn't being pushed out. I was making space. The morning I left, the lake was perfectly still. No boats, no ripples. The house smelled like lemon cleaner and fresh laundry. My daughter had insisted on tidying up before her in-laws arrived. I stood beneath the wall clock above the fireplace. It's older than the house. Brass trim faded, hands steady. My wife bought it at a roadside antique shop 20 years ago. Said she liked that it didn't need batteries. I adjusted it slightly before closing the front door. Not enough for anyone to notice, just enough for me. I didn't leave town. That's the first thing you should know. I rented a small furnished studio 15 minutes away, above a bait shop near the marina. The place smelled faintly of minnows and old carpet glue. The mattress sagged in the middle. The refrigerator hummed like it was arguing with itself. It was temporary. That's what I told myself. On the second night, I sat at the small round table by the window and watched the lake through binoculars I hadn't used in years. Lights flickered in my house. Shadows moved behind the curtains. Nothing unusual. The third morning, at 10:42 a.m., I powered on the app connected to the clock above the fireplace. The feed came alive. The living room looked the same, couch aligned, rug straight, sunlight cutting across the hardwood floor. Maris Voss stood near the kitchen island with a grocery bag in her hand. Tovin Voss moved slowly past the hallway, one palm resting against the wall like he needed the support. They looked ordinary. I felt foolish for a moment. Maybe I had imagined the tension. Maybe I had read too much into posture and tone. When you've spent decades watching strangers, sometimes you forget how to stop watching. I made coffee, burned it slightly. The bitter smell filled the studio. At 2:13 p.m., the porch camera sent a motion alert. I leaned forward. A silver SUV pulled into the driveway. A young couple stepped out. Baseball caps, weekend duffel bags, a bright orange cooler between them. They paused at the door as if waiting. Maris opened it before they knocked. She smiled. It was a practiced smile, the kind I trained new front desk hires to use on opening day. They entered, no hesitation. I watched Maris guide them toward the hallway, pointing toward the Lakeview windows as she spoke. I couldn't hear the audio clearly, but I recognized the gestures, the tour, the quick pivot to show amenities, the hand sweeping across space like she was presenting something for the first time. I muted the coffee machine and turned up the volume. "Checkout is 11, Maris said faintly. Checkout, not feel better, not rest well. Checkout. Tovin appeared 15 minutes later, carrying a stack of folded sheets from the laundry room. Fresh ones, crisp corners. He changed the guest bed. Not their bed. The guest bed. I felt something shift inside my chest. Not anger, not yet. Just alignment. Pieces sliding into place. By 6:08 p.m., music drifted faintly through the open windows. Laughter. A cork popped. The couple carried wine onto the dock. They weren't relatives. They weren't neighbors. They were guests. I replayed the footage 3 times, slowing it down. Maris handing over a small card. Tovin checking his watch at exactly 10:58 the next morning as the couple rolled their cooler back to the SUV. At 11:03 a.m., the bedroom window opened. Sheets were stripped. Turnover. I didn't call anyone. Instead, I opened my laptop and began a new folder. Lake activity. I saved clips, time-stamped everything, documented arrival, departure, duration. That evening, Lena texted me. "Dad, they seem settled. Thank you again for being so understanding." I stared at the screen for a long time before responding. Of course. 2 words. Nothing more. At 3:02 p.m. the next day, another motion alert pinged. This time, 2 cars. 4 young men stepped out carrying backpacks and a case of beer. Maris met them at the door with the same practiced smile. Tovin waved from the kitchen, and that's when I stopped wondering whether I was mistaken, and started counting how many strangers had keys to my house. By the 4th day, I stopped reacting and started measuring. In resort work, emotion is expensive, documentation is cheap. So I opened a yellow legal pad and drew 3 columns: arrival, departure, duration. At 3:07 p.m., another SUV rolled into the driveway. Different plate, Washington State. I zoomed the porch camera and froze the frame long enough to read the last 4 digits. Wrote them down. Arrival. At 10:56 a.m. the next morning, that same SUV backed out. Tovin stood near the steps, arms folded, watching the taillights disappear. Departure. The rhythm was clean, too clean. No doctor visits, no pharmacy runs, no physical therapy vans, just rolling suitcases and coolers. On the 5th day, I noticed something else. Maris carried a plastic storage bin from the garage into the hallway closet. I rewound the footage, slowed it to half speed. The lid lifted just long enough for me to see neatly stacked towels. Rolled, not folded. Exactly how short-term rentals present them for guests. That wasn't recovery. That was presentation. I brewed another pot of coffee in the studio and let it go cold beside me. Outside my window, the marina clanged with loose metal halyards hitting boat masts in the wind. A gull screamed. The world kept moving like nothing was wrong. At 2:58 p.m., a minivan arrived. 4 women stepped out, laughing, one carrying a sash that read, "Bride Tribe." I leaned closer to the screen. Maris opened the door before they reached it. "Dock access is through the back," I heard faintly. Dock access. I didn't need to hear more. I opened my laptop and pulled up the county zoning page. Coeur d'Alene requires a short-term rental permit. There are occupancy limits, noise regulations, insurance riders. I knew the process. I had helped dozens of resort owners navigate it over the years. I checked the public registry. No listing under my name, no permit attached to the address. That was the first time my pulse actually changed. Not from anger, but from clarity. At 11:02 a.m. the next morning, as the minivan left, I saw Tovin kneel by the dock and scrub something from the wood, maybe spilled wine. He worked carefully, deliberately, like a man trying to erase evidence of fun. I wrote down the time. Then I checked the electric utility portal for my property. I still had access. Monthly usage had nearly doubled compared to the same week last year. Late-night spikes, weekend surges. I printed the graph. At 4:12 p.m., Lena called. "Dad, you're doing okay?" she asked. Her voice sounded tired, not suspicious, just stretched thin. "I'm fine," I said. "How are things at the house?" A pause. Just long enough. "Busy," she replied, "but they're adjusting." Busy. I didn't challenge it. I let the word hang there between us like a misplaced piece of furniture. That night, I compared timestamps from the camera with the energy spikes. Check-ins aligned almost perfectly with the surge in electricity. Outdoor lights on past midnight. Interior lights flickering in rooms that should have been empty. This wasn't a favor. It was a schedule. On the 6th day, I noticed something small, but sharp. As Maris adjusted the couch pillows, she turned toward the fireplace, toward the clock. She reached up. For a second, my breath caught. Her fingers brushed the frame. Then she straightened it slightly and stepped away. The camera feed shifted half an inch, just enough to tell me someone had touched it. I leaned back in my chair and felt the quiet weight of that movement settle in. If they were careful enough to adjust what looked out of place, what else were they careful about? And more importantly, who had taught them to be? On the 7th night, I stopped watching the house and started looking for it. There's a difference. Watching tells you what is happening. Looking tells you who is behind it. I opened my laptop and typed 3 words into the search bar. Lakefront Coeur d'Alene rental. Pages of listings appeared. Smiling couples, sunset docks, kayaks tied neatly to posts. I scrolled slowly, and then I saw it. My dock. The angle was clever, cropped tight enough that you couldn't see the clock through the living room window, but wide enough to show the cedar railing I built myself 15 years ago. Luxury lakefront retreat, private dock, sleeps 8. The listing price sat there in plain text. $870 per night, $1,050 on weekends. I didn't feel the anger right away. What I felt was recognition. The description used phrases I had written dozens of times in my career. Sunset views, quiet mornings, perfect for couples or small groups. It was polished, structured, persuasive. There were reviews, 27 of them. Amazing host. Seamless check-in. Will definitely return. Host name, D. Voss Properties. Not my name, not my daughter's. I clicked through the calendar, booked nearly every weekend for the next 6 weeks, several midweek stays as well. This wasn't an experiment. It was a system. I leaned back in the chair. The studio creaked under me. Outside, a pickup truck drove past the marina, country music bleeding faintly through open windows. My phone buzzed. A new motion alert. I split the screen. On one side, the listing. On the other, my living room. Two women stepped inside carrying yoga mats and a bottle of Prosecco. Maris handed them a folded sheet of paper. "Wi-Fi passwords on there," she said softly. Wi-Fi password. Not medical instructions. Not recovery guidelines. I watched Tovin carry out a small trash bag from the kitchen. He tied it carefully, like someone who didn't want anything spilling out too soon. I minimized the video and opened the electric account again. Another spike. Then I logged into the water utility. Usage had tripled compared to last summer. I pulled the credit statement I still had access to through shared family expenses. That's when I saw it. 3 charges labeled cleaning services, CDA, $240, $310, $290, all charged to Lena's card. I stared at the numbers for a long time. The coffee beside me had gone cold again, the surface forming that thin, reflective skin that catches light like oil. He wasn't just renting the house. He was letting my daughter pay the overhead. I opened the listing once more and clicked Contact Host. The platform allowed guest inquiries before booking. I typed slowly. "Hi, interested in booking for an anniversary weekend. Is dock access guaranteed?" A reply came 12 minutes later. "Yes, private dock access included. Early check-in available upon request." Signed, Darian. No hesitation, no apology, just business. I scrolled down the calendar again and noticed something else. One of the largest bookings, 3 nights at peak weekend rate, fell exactly on Lena's wedding anniversary. I remembered her mentioning dinner plans, something special. Special. I closed the laptop gently and stared at the wall of the studio apartment. For a long moment, I considered calling him, confronting him, demanding an explanation. But explanations are cheap when someone has already built a structure around a lie. Instead, I clicked Reserve. 3 nights, under a business account I hadn't used in years. Payment confirmed. I booked my own house. And then I sent Lena a message. "Can you come by the lake house Friday evening? Something's not right." 3 dots appeared almost immediately. "Dad? What do you mean?" I didn't answer right away, because the real question wasn't what she meant. It was what he would do when I walked back through that door. The booking confirmation came through at 9:14 p.m. 3 nights, full rate, paid in advance. I didn't feel victorious. I felt steady. There's a difference between catching someone and understanding them. I needed the second part before I moved toward the first. The next morning, I went deeper, not into the house, into Darian Voss. Public records are quiet things. They don't accuse. They just sit there, waiting for someone patient enough to read them. I started with business filings. D. Voss Properties was registered 6 months ago. No physical office, just a mailing address in town. Then I searched court records. 3 civil filings in the past year. One from a marketing firm in Spokane. Another from a short-term lender in Boise. The third, dismissed, but not erased. I clicked into the lender case. Outstanding balance, $182,400. My fingers paused on the trackpad. That number wasn't casual debt. That was pressure. That was time running thin. I leaned back and let the room settle around me. The marina below the studio was loud that morning, engines coughing to life, dock lines slapping wood. Life happening in plain view. Meanwhile, my lake house was being used as proof of something. I returned to the rental platform and scrolled through the listing more carefully. The photos weren't just scenic. They were deliberate, wide shots that suggested ownership. A caption under one image read, "Our family's private retreat, I zoomed into the metadata of one uploaded image. It wasn't difficult. Date stamped 2 weeks after I left. Location tagged to my exact coordinates. He wasn't just renting my house. He was presenting it as his. That's when the second layer became clear. This wasn't only about cash flow, it was about collateral. If Darian could show consistent rental income, if he could demonstrate property access, if he could convince lenders that this was a controlled asset, then the lake house wasn't a temporary favor. It was leverage. I opened the lender's site and looked up application requirements. Proof of income, proof of operational control, asset verification. I didn't need to see the paperwork to understand the strategy. He was buying time. Not with his own property, with mine. My phone buzzed. Another motion alert. I switched screens. Inside the house, Darian stood in the living room. First time I'd seen him on the feed since moving out. He adjusted the throw pillows, then stepped back, studying the room. Maris entered from the hallway. "Next group arrives at 3, she said. Darian nodded. "And the payment cleared?" "It did. Cleared." He walked toward the fireplace, toward the clock. For a brief second, he reached up, then stopped. His hand hovered in the air, fingers inches from the frame. He frowned slightly, like something felt off, but he couldn't name it. Then he lowered his hand. "That thing's always crooked," he muttered. "Always crooked." I exhaled slowly. He hadn't seen it. Not yet. I pulled up Lena's shared credit statement again. Another charge had posted overnight. Cleaning services, supplies, linen replacement, all under her card. I typed out a message, then deleted it. Typed again, deleted again. Confrontation would give him time to restructure, to spin, to prepare. Documentation would give me control. That's when it hit me, fully. I wasn't being pushed out of my home. I was being erased from it. And if he was willing to use my house to convince strangers it belonged to him, how far was he willing to go before someone stopped him? I closed the laptop and looked at the calendar. Friday was 2 days away. 3 nights booked, full occupancy, and 1 anniversary dinner that wasn't happening at any restaurant in town. I stood up, walked to the small window of the studio, and stared at the distant line of the lake. For the first time since this began, I wasn't watching anymore. I was preparing. Because if Darian believed the house was leverage, he had no idea who had just checked in. Friday came with a sky too blue for what I was about to do. I arrived before anyone else. 3 hours before check-in. The key code still worked. He hadn't changed it. That told me something, either confidence or distraction. The door opened with the same soft click I'd heard 1,000 times. The air inside smelled like lemon cleaner and cedar. Windows open, curtains drawn back. The house staged like a showroom, not a home, a product. I walked slowly through each room, not touching anything at first, just observing. The throw pillows had been replaced, new neutral covers, the bookshelf rearranged. Several of Lena's childhood photos were gone from the mantel, removed. I stopped there longer than I expected. Erasing is quiet work. It doesn't make noise. It just leaves empty rectangles where memory used to sit. I reached into my jacket pocket and felt the printed documents, copies of the deed, tax records, lender filings, screenshots of the listing. Paper is heavier than it looks when it carries truth. At 4:02 p.m., a black SUV pulled into the driveway. I watched from the side window. 2 couples stepped out. Weekend luggage, wine bags, easy laughter. The rental guests. They entered with the temporary code Darian had provided them. They were polite, careful, excited. They believed they were renting from the owner. They were wrong. I stepped forward before they could set their bags down. "Afternoon," I said calmly. 4 startled faces turned toward me. The man in front spoke first. We booked this place." "You did," I said evenly. "Under DeVos Properties." Their eyes flickered. "Is there a problem?" one of the women asked. "Yes," I said. "There is." I handed the man the copy of the deed. "This property is legally owned by me. I never authorized its use as a short-term rental. Silence. Confusion first. Then discomfort. The man checked his phone, scrolled rapidly. We paid through the platform. It's confirmed. I'm aware, I said. You've been misled. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't accuse them. They weren't the problem. One of the women looked around the room slowly. So, this isn't his house? No, I said. It isn't. The realization landed. I could see it in the way their posture shifted, from relaxed guests to people standing inside someone else's living room. I suggest you contact the platform immediately, I continued. I'll be here while you do. They stepped aside, huddled quietly, dialing customer service. I walked to the kitchen counter and waited. At 4:17 p.m., another car pulled into the driveway. A silver sedan. Lena. She stepped out slowly, eyes scanning the house like she was trying to understand the message I'd sent her 2 days ago. When she opened the door and saw strangers inside, her expression changed. Dad, what's going on? I met her eyes. Ask them who they rented from. The man holding his phone turned awkwardly. From Darian, through the platform. Lena blinked. That's not possible, she said softly. I placed the deed in her hands. It is. Her fingers trembled slightly as she read the header. Property description. Legal boundaries. My name. She looked at me, then around the room. Darian said, I know what he said, I replied gently. The rental guests finished their call. Refunds were being processed. They would find alternative lodging. They gathered their bags quietly. One of the women paused by Lena. I'm sorry, she whispered. We didn't know. Lena nodded, but didn't answer. At 4:36 p.m., Darian's truck turned into the driveway. He stepped out, smiling, until he saw the unfamiliar SUV and his wife standing in the doorway. He froze mid-stride. I watched something flicker behind his eyes. Calculation. Dad, he said evenly. You're early. For what? I asked. For the weekend. He glanced at the departing guests. His jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. Why are they leaving? He asked. You tell us, Lena said quietly. Her voice wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. Darian shifted his weight, hands sliding into his pockets. There's a misunderstanding. There isn't, I said calmly. I held up my phone and pressed play. His voice filled the room from 2 nights ago, recorded clearly from the living room feed. If I show consistent bookings, the lender backs off. It's leverage. Lena inhaled sharply. Darian's face drained of color. He hadn't known about the camera. That was the first crack. But it wasn't the only one, because when Lena looked at him, it wasn't anger in her eyes. It was something worse. Recognition. You used my card, she said. It wasn't a question. He didn't answer. The silence said enough. I stepped closer, steady, not loud. The lender you owe $182,400 to isn't going to be impressed when they learn you don't control the property you listed as collateral. His eyes snapped to mine. That was the second crack. You looked into that? He asked. Yes. For the first time since this began, Darian didn't look confident. He looked cornered. But cornered men don't always fold. Sometimes they push. And when he opened his mouth again, what he said wasn't what I expected at all. Darian didn't shout. He didn't deny it. He did something more dangerous. He straightened his back and smiled. You're overreacting, he said calmly. This was temporary. I was going to tell you. The way he said it, like he'd been generous, like timing was the only issue. Lena stood very still beside me. I could feel the tremor in her breathing without even looking at her. You used my card, she said again. I paid you back, he replied quickly. Most of it, and the bookings were covering the rest. It was an investment. Investment. He gestured toward the windows, the lake, The dock. This house is sitting here doing nothing. I turned it into revenue. That helps all of us. All of us? I let that phrase hang in the air. By listing it as your property to secure a loan? I asked quietly. His jaw tightened. You don't understand the business side. I understand collateral, I said. I understand misrepresentation. And I understand that you presented something you don't own to a lender who thinks you do. Lena's head turned sharply toward him. You told a lender this was yours? Silence. That was the third crack. He looked at her now, not me. It wasn't like that. Then how was it? She asked. The lake outside shimmered in late afternoon light. The house felt smaller than it ever had. Darian took a step closer to Lena. I was protecting us. The marketing firm deal fell through. I needed a bridge loan. Just a few months. How much? She asked. He hesitated. Tell me the number. His voice lowered. 182. Lena closed her eyes. I didn't move, because this wasn't my moment to speak. I trusted you, she said. He exhaled sharply. I was going to fix it before you noticed. Before you noticed. I reached into my folder and removed another document. The rental platform terms. Short-term rentals in this county require a permit, I said calmly. One you never applied for. Darian's expression shifted again. This isn't criminal, he said quickly. It's just paperwork. It becomes criminal when you claim operational control over an asset you don't own, I replied. His breathing changed. Faster now. You're threatening me? I'm informing you. Lena stepped back from him. That's why you said dinner was canceled tonight, she whispered. You needed the house empty. He didn't answer, because that part was true. The silence between them stretched thin and fragile. I was going to tell you after the next booking cleared, he said finally. I just needed time. Time. There's a word men use when they mean access. I walked toward the fireplace and adjusted the clock slightly, straightened it. Darian watched my hand carefully. You've been inside the house this whole time, he said slowly. Yes. He let out a short laugh, but there was no humor in it. You recorded me. Yes. The word didn't need emphasis. Lena looked from him to me. You knew? She asked me quietly. Not at first, I said, but I suspected. She nodded once, slow. Then she did something I hadn't prepared for. She pulled her phone out and dialed a number. Darian's eyes widened. Lena, don't. She didn't stop. This is Coeur d'Alene County Code Enforcement, the voice on speaker said. Darian stepped forward. Hang up. She didn't. I need to report an unpermitted short-term rental operating at my father's property, she said steadily. The room shifted in that instant, because this wasn't just exposure. This was public. And when Darian realized that the lender, the platform, and now the county were about to learn the same truth at the same time, the last piece of confidence left his face. But even then, even standing there with everything unraveling, he still said one thing that made my stomach drop. You think this ends here? He asked quietly. And for the first time since Friday began, I wasn't entirely sure it did. The county notice was posted 3 days later, bright orange, right on the front window. Operations suspended pending review. The lender contacted Darian within 48 hours of that. The rental platform froze his account the same afternoon. I didn't celebrate any of it. There was no shouting, no victory lap, just paperwork, catching up to a story that should never have been written that way. Lena moved into the studio apartment with me for a week, not because she had nowhere else to go, but because she needed quiet, real quiet. Not the kind that hides things. One evening we sat on the small balcony overlooking the marina, boats rocking gently, the smell of lake water and gasoline drifting up in soft waves. She held the old brass house key in her hand, the same key I'd given her when she first married Darian. "I thought building something meant protecting it at all costs," she said softly. I didn't interrupt. I didn't realize protecting something also means protecting it from the person standing next to you. There are moments when a parent wants to say, "I told you so." This wasn't one of them. Instead, I told her something my late wife once told me when I nearly made a business mistake that would have cost us everything. "Ownership isn't about control," I said. "It's about responsibility. If you can't say the truth out loud about something you're doing, you probably shouldn't be doing it." She nodded. The lake was calm that night. No rental guests. No motion alerts. Just wind brushing across water. I returned to the house the following week. I took down the temporary staging items, brought Lena's childhood photos back to the mantel, put the worn blue quilt over the couch again, and I adjusted the clock above the fireplace, just slightly crooked, exactly the way it always was. Because some things aren't meant to look perfect. They're meant to look lived in. Darian moved out quietly. The lender took control of his business assets. There were legal conversations, but they were handled through attorneys and spreadsheets, not anger. I never filed charges. I didn't need to. Consequences had already found him. The lake house remains mine. Not as an investment, not as leverage, not as collateral. Just a place where mornings begin with coffee and end with the sound of water against the dock. Sometimes Lena visits on Sundays. We sit on the porch. We talk about ordinary things again, and every now and then she'll glance at that clock and smile. That's the end of Silas Go-to-Bed's story. I want to take a moment to thank you, genuinely, for sitting with this one all the way through. If this story meant something to you, share it with someone you think needs to hear it. And if you haven't subscribed yet, please do. It's the simplest way to make sure you don't miss what's coming next. Another story awaits you right here on your screen. YouTube believes you'll enjoy it.